a dream come true. Me and you, whoa, teach me to talk. The podcast, take two.
Hi, I'm Laura Mize, pediatric speech-language pathologist.
And I'm Macy Mize Usher, pediatric speech-language pathologist. And welcome to episode 2, Teach Me to Talk's podcast, take 2. We are so excited that you're joining us for episode 2. Now, Mom, I want you to really explain how therapists can get CEU credit, because I don't know if we really did that in the first episode.
I don't think we did. So just like with my other shows, podcast, they are also courses. We're going to register those with ASHA like we do our other courses here at Teach Me to Talk. And so you can find the link right here below, and you're going to listen or watch anyway. So you might as well go ahead and knock out some CEUs with that. So we're happy to be able to offer that here. So thank you for pointing that out. You'll just pay your fee, and then the test or the assessment will immediately pop up. Go ahead and complete those little self-assessments, and they're always, we don't believe in hard tests here at Teach Me to Talk. We don't want anybody to be concerned about the tests. So they're just little self-assessment questions. So answer those. It should take you less than 5 minutes. Your certificate will pop right up as soon as you enter your information there, and so you can have that. You'll also have a certificate sent to you by email. That's how all our courses work at Teach Me to Talk. Super easy way to get your CEUs. And when you specialize in early intervention, it always used to make me really upset when I had to take courses that I did not need or care about just to get all my hours in a cost-effective way. So we made a way for you to do that here at Teach Me to Talk, so please take advantage of that.
We also appreciate your feedback. Also, if you're a parent or a therapist, please email us questions or concerns so we can maybe handle that as a podcast topic.
And send the concerns to Macy.
Got to get my email set up. Macy at teachmetotalk.com, Macy. But let's go ahead and jump into what we're going to be talking about today. So today we're going to be talking about the Autism Talk, discussing autism with families, how we personally do it. You know, there's not, the perfect right way to do it, but there definitely could be a wrong way. But
and I've done those. And so certainly just with hanging in here and being in this field so long. But it's a reality that happens for all of us. We have to have the talk. Now there are, I want to kind of approach this with the reasons that therapists tell me they don't want to do it. And therapists email us about this all the time. How do you have the talk? What do you say? What do you do? And so let's just talk about how we do it. And I wanted to start with the statistics, because talking about autism is a reality for any of us who work in early intervention, because just the sheer statistics. And so we looked these up yesterday, or I did, to make sure I was saying the right numbers, but 1 in 31 kids, and that boils down to, when we look at boys versus girls, 1 in 20 boys now in the United States is being diagnosed with autism. Girls, the number is 1 in 70. We know we're probably missing some girls because autism looks different in girls than boys, or certainly can. So we want to be sure that we all, as SLPs, recognize, hey, you're not avoiding this. This is, and sometimes let's just kind of dive into the main reason lots of therapists don't want to talk about this is they feel like it's not in their scope of practice. So let me just say, as a speech language pathologist, and again, we've kind of got our career covered here, because, I've been practicing for more than 30 years. Macy is
in my 6th year of practicing.
Exactly. So we've got kind of that covered with when we went to grad school and all those things, and everything in between. But this is such a reality for us. And so to say still in 2025, I'm not going to talk about autism with parents because that's out of my scope of practice. It's completely unrealistic. And I believe that we're doing a real disservice to families when you have their main person, probably the person who sees them even more than the pediatrician. You are probably their most frequent healthcare advocate, even if you don't think about yourself as that way. And so when you refuse to participate in those conversations, you're really doing a disservice to the families that have been entrusted to you.
Definitely. I don't think we should be scared of the word autism either. We shouldn't be scared. We shouldn't be scared. We just we shouldn't be scared of the word autism, okay? And so as a, well, I don't think I'm a new grad anymore.
You're not.
Whatever I am, I think, of course, it gets easier the more times you do it.
I do too. And I tell therapists, just do it scared.
Yeah.
Even if you are, in your whatever your 33rd year of practice, you're still going to be scared when you have that conversation.
Yeah.
And so it's no longer good enough to say, I'm not going there. That's not my scope of practice. If you are a speech language pathologist, yes, it is. And again, yesterday, to prep for this show, I went on ASHA's practice portal. And if you are a speech language pathologist, you're aware ASHA.org has a fantastic resource there for you, dedicated by diagnosis. So any kind of kid that you're seeing that you feel like, what is the evidence here? What does research tell me that I should do? Or I need a refresher on whatever diagnosis this is.
Yeah.
You can go kind of take a look there. And so on the practice portal, when you look up autism spectrum disorder, it says, direct quote, speech language pathologists, SLPs, play a central role in the screening, assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of persons with autism spectrum disorder. So there, what was that word before treatment? It was diagnosis. So yes, you are within your scope of practice to be able to feel like you're confident enough to talk about that with parents. You are not overstepping your lane, not according to the national organization that credentials all of us. There could be some differences from state to state with licensure rules, but as a whole, under that umbrella, as a speech language pathologist, you're covered with that.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. You're not making, the official diagnosis, but this should empower us. This should give us confidence that it's okay to refer out for that neurodevelopmental evaluation.
Yeah, and referring for an autism evaluation is certainly different than diagnosing a child with autism.
Yeah.
And in no way, shape, or form am I saying, hey, you should, add to your sign of your office or practice,
Don't do that.
Get your autism diagnosis here. Do not do that. But feel confident that you are not overstepping your role here to be able to talk about the characteristics of autism that you might see with the child.
Right. So referring a child is not the same as diagnosing.
Right.
But we can rely on what ASHA says, that we are involved, and we should feel confident that we are a central role within the team to diagnose autism. I so appreciate my previous position with the University of Kentucky's UK developmental pediatrician team. I was a part of a team. We really believed a team approach. So there was an SLP, there was an OT, there was, of course, our wonderful developmental pediatricians, and parent support staff, social worker. That there was a whole team approach. Whatever was needed was really valued. And I like a team approach to receive a medical diagnosis because, it's not just one person. And
There's safety in numbers.
Yes, the team that I worked with very much valued all of the language assessment results and the things that I was seeing with, the overall picture of the child, the language, especially the portion that I felt confident to talk about.
Exactly.
Within that team approach.
Exactly. So that was usually the number one reason that therapists will not talk about autism with families. And I'm not saying that therapists are refusing to do this. I'm just saying sometimes that's kind of their go-to thing. The second thing is you are afraid that you do not have the ability to really accurately and consistently recognize autism.
I want to jump in. I want to validate, though. I want to jump in and validate. Of course, you're going to be nervous to share this news. Of course. It's, it could be uncomfortable. It kind of should be uncomfortable to tell a parent, something is different within their child. So I just want to step back and validate. Even though now I've done this hundreds of times, I'm very nervous still.
Sure.
I still cry with the parent if they're crying, So I do want to validate. But that was a good point, Mom. You were saying that we should rely on a screening tool.
So this is a little point of discussion that Macy and I have had a lot since for a long time, but especially these last few months since you came on with Teach Me to Talk, is I said to her, honey, what screener did you use for autism for kids that you thought were going to get that diagnosis? What screener did you use for that, kind of before you talked to the parents, blah, 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 blah. And her response was,
a screener? What do you mean? I'm just being honest.
I know.
And I do provide parents with a handout.
My handout, our handout now, but there's a great handout. Let me go ahead and mention that. It's in show 437 and 438, explaining autism for parents. And even though kind of the language with how we talk about autism has changed in the last few years with neuro-affirming language here, and making sure that we're using language that people who, how they want to be identified, whether they want to be autistic child or child with autism, you know, that's a family preference. And parents kind of, you know, some parents don't care at all and don't understand what all the hoopla is about. But some parents do care about that. So we do have to, again,
respect.
And what I'm trying to say here is, even though the language has changed a lot about how we talk about autism in the last few years, the diagnostic criteria has not. And so take a look at those shows or courses, and we'll link them here below, 437 and 438. And you can walk through a little worksheet or a handout that I developed for those shows, and it's been in almost everything I've taught about autism now for a long time. And that criteria has not changed. And so if you need a way to kind of walk through that, that will lead you there.
That's a good point. Real quick. I always like to provide the handout or what we're about to talk about, the screener, as something physical, visual for the parent to read, because as soon as anyone gets stressed, right, you go into your 7 Fs. And so somebody, then you're going into very concrete thinking, right? So, you know, this is probably going to be stressful. Maybe, you know, uncomfortable to talk about.
Sometimes parents do feel relieved when there finally is a label, and I've had moms say to me, you know, thank goodness we know what this is. We know what to do. There's a lot of research behind this. I could jump on this. Now it's not just something floating around in the air. It's confirmed. Here we go. But there is some kind of deep emotional response from most parents because they are, even if they've suspected it, it's still news that they might not have wanted to hear.
And so relying on that another, you know, learning style, that providing that visual handout is always great after you heavily relied on just verbal discussion. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. No, I love that point.
And I like the screener that you're.
And we'll talk about that in a second. But as soon as I think, hey, I know we're looking at autism here, I get my stuff ready so that even if I'm not going to have that talk for a few sessions, and let's go ahead and talk about that, about timing. Do you want to talk about timing right here? Or you want to save that?
Let's talk about timing. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Okay, so sometimes with a family, you think, oh, I can't go there yet. She's not ready for this yet. I had an experience like this, and we were talking about this yesterday when we were prepping the show, and I was saying, we were talking about just times that the things, just all our range of experiences, but I was saying that I had a mom that called me from the very first call, sobbing hysterically on the phone. I do not want you to tell me that my son has autism.
That would be hard.
While I was writing the autism workbook, I was working with this mother with an autistic kid who said to me almost every time she thought that I was going to say, she just would break down and cry, and then she stopped bringing him to therapy for a long time. She had her in-laws bring him, or her parents or dad, and it was just this huge thing. And I tap danced for months and months and months, and then COVID hit, and then, you know, all that, and I still stayed in touch with that family right after he got it, right after all that initial craziness with COVID. He did, and I moved away. I moved to Florida, and so he got a diagnosis, and I have seen that family since I've been back a couple of times in very, like Costco, where you're not, you know, right, but, you know, and we've said, you know, but there's that, I hate that I didn't do it. I hate that I didn't just say, I love you, but. So my advice
I
is,
appreciate you sharing that perspective because we have all felt like that too. I appreciate that. I mean, it's very easy to say, "Oh, I would never do that."
Yeah.
But for the
I would have said I would never do it.
Yeah.
I would have said that. And oh my gosh, it was hard.
It was hard.
It was
really,
really, really
so
hard.
I do appreciate that you said that.
Yeah.
So you're right. So sometimes with the timing of things, we think maybe we're taught this way that you have to develop a relationship first. But in my experience,
I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, you're never doing that again, and I don't do that anymore either.
Yeah. And I think as soon as I think it, I need to. I got to tell a parent, because to me, I started looking at it like I'm withholding information.
Yeah.
And I would never want to do that with a family. And so the earlier you can have the conversation, the better. I don't think you have to wait months and months to build rapport. I think if you feel like you can't say it yet, you need to lead up to that with, and what I do is just talk about the characteristics of autism that I see in that child.
Yes.
And a lot of times that just will open the door. And as soon as there is a hint of an open door, I walk right through it.
Which has happened many times in an initial evaluation as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a kid who's coming in, the parent's asking, hey, why do they repeat themselves? I've Googled a term called echolalia. Why are they repeating this whole entire Bluey episode before, which happened as one of my favorite patients ever. I miss her so much. But she was spinning on the swing. She came in, she's talking to, herself, scripting a Bluey episode, and the mom's immediately like, why is that happening? I mean, I told her right then and there.
Yeah.
This could be, I'm not saying this is, but you know what? This is really common in children with autism. This is a characteristic of autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this before? And that mom was immediately relieved that I had an answer to that question. So that door opened really quickly for me. So sometimes I've done that immediately in the evaluation, but I like to give myself a month timer. So if I start to get the itch, which my autism radar is going off, that's what I call it, I'm like, okay, immediately within the month I need to.
That's a great timeline. I like that.
Because usually I'm seeing the child once, maybe twice a week, and so 4 sessions later I need to have this talk.
Yeah.
I have a very personal way I do this. I know not everybody agrees with this, but the way that I process this is I really pray to God, when do you want me to say this? When can you open the door for me? And I rely on when I feel like I'm led to do that conversation.
And we just had this happen this summer with a darling, precious family that Macy actually saw before, and then we wanted to be a part of our summer camp program as well. And so we just started talking about it. You had been seeing their twins, and you had been seeing the brother.
Together, though.
Yeah.
And in our clinic, because they were twins.
Right. And so anyway, we talked about it, and it was a surprise because you had just seen the brother. You had not seen, you had not seen the little girl.
I never laid my eyes on the girl until we switched to this clinic.
Yeah.
And so then the girl came in. I mean, you knew within a minute.
Yeah.
Classic characteristics, walking on the toes. Not
pretty avoidant. She was pretty shut down. And as soon as we approached her, she did everything she could to scurry on her little tiptoes right away from us.
Visually inspecting toys.
Within
the minute of walking in.
Right. Didn't respond to her name. Didn't
Delayed
use any
language,
gestures.
of course.
Zero
words.
Words or gestures or sounds. I don't think I heard her little voice.
You're so right.
Yeah.
So anyway, the characteristics were very clear within a minute.
Yeah.
This happened to us.
Mom and her twin brother already had the diagnosis.
Because
he had seen Macy before.
Yes.
And then, was it the next week or the next week?
Well, immediately when they left, we were like,
oh my goodness. Didn't expect that coming. Didn't see that coming. Yeah.
We had to have a talk.
Yeah. And then the next week, the mom walked right in and just started telling us the story, and it was easy. And she said, I've been wondering it too, but she didn't start thinking about it till she said she brought here, and then really kind of started looking at her with the things that we said even in the first session.
Yeah, so with that story anyway, that's when the prayer was really successful for us.
Right, and it just kind of opened the door. And I've certainly done that, and I've had when parents have walked into the next session and said, Laura, I Googled autism, what do you think? And then, or they say, hey, I forgot to mention that my sister's little boy has autism. Do you, you know, and then anytime they say something, or again, the question like, why does he use that? Don't be afraid. Don't think you have to wait. You know, just go ahead and accept that this is the time that I'm supposed to have this conversation.
Yes.
And so, you know, I think that's great.
So with timing overall, we think the sooner the better.
Right.
It used to kind of be preached, right? You need to build a relationship.
Yeah.
First, but I've really been more successful the sooner the better.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that too, especially after that very prolonged, pronounced, that was awful for that mom and for me. So I needed to just rip the Band-Aid off and just, but you know, because of that whole crazy time, even in my personal life, you know, it just, So,
hey, but I don't want you to have guilt or shame or any other therapist out there. This is a guilt-free, shame-free zone.
Exactly. I appreciate you saying that, honey.
We can't change that past, right?
That's right.
So,
but I'm just saying I learned a really important lesson. And even though I thought that I was doing that mom a favor by, you know, she couldn't do it emotionally. I mean, she said, do not say this to me.
Yeah.
And so she already knew. And so, and again, it doesn't change your treatment plan. Even if something happens and you feel like, whatever, do the things that you would do anyway. And so that's why we didn't say diagnoses. You know, in the 90s, parents did not want their kids diagnosed with anything. So even when we had neurodivergent children, they got services and they had an IEP, and you called it everything but sometimes what the most obvious diagnosis was. And so that was a totally different time in healthcare and in our country. And Macy, you know, you used to tell me all the time, I don't understand why that was such a big deal. I'm like, honey, you know, this is just how it was.
It was
you know?
different.
Yeah, it was totally different. Yeah.
And I think something else to point out, when we were discussing the beginning of our careers, because I've started within this last decade when, you know, whatever the reason is, there are more children diagnosed with autism.
Right.
We're not going to get onto that political bandwagon right now. No way do we like to avoid those type of things.
Absolutely.
Here. And to value all of, you know, parents and therapists. But what I'm trying to say is that the perspective is so different now that it's 1 in 31. The clinic that I came from, I mean, I think 90% of my caseload was children with autism.
But it wasn't that way in the 90s. Like it was we looked up in the year 2000, it was 1 in 150 kids were diagnosed with autism. And okay. So you did have only a couple of kids on your caseload that you thought were autistic, and then that number grew. And so we may have had more kids that were medically complex, but in my career, you know, my 33rd year, this is something that, I mean, I've seen it happen like right before my eyes. And so it was very different. And so the climate was different. And special education services were not like, you know, now we're like, our kids have a right, you know, and we were like that then, but people there was a big mainstream movement. Yeah. And so you didn't want, you know, you didn't necessarily want your kid pulled out, especially, and not that parents want that now. What I'm saying is the climate was just different. And so, you know, even in, you know, your brother, you know, even in the things, you know, he has dyslexia, he has, you know, a lot of other diagnoses, but is neurodivergent. And so we didn't pursue getting an autism diagnosis or things like that. And so that's just, you know, again, your therapists who are seasoned with the, you know, the laugh lines everywhere. You know, we were in a different time. And so
I think it's important to understand that perspective and to understand as a new therapist that it has changed. There are more children with autism now. Yeah. And when we were discussing, you know, the beginnings of our caseloads, I was shocked when I was like, do you remember your first kids with autism?
And I do.
I know, but for me, that was like
your whole caseload.
My first day as a CF. 3 out of the 9 kids, I worked in a school. 3 in the 9 kids, half of the kids of that day had autism, even working in a school setting.
Yeah.
But for you to remember the names and the ages and
Aaron, beautiful little blonde-headed boy.
For you to remember that was bizarre because it was like just the majority of my caseload has always been autism, and it doesn't sound like at the beginning the majority of yours is. And as you become a seasoned therapist,
well, in the 90s, as my career, as I saw more and more kids, and then certainly by the beginning of the 2000s, we knew to call it that. Dr. Greenspan's work came out.
Yes,
that huge. I think it's called Encouraging the Special Needs Child, Encouraging Intellectual and Emotional Growth, or something like that. But we all went to the Real bookstore at Barnes & Noble, and everybody bought their book, and we had a little therapist group, and we sat down. And I don't even think I told you this part. And we sat down and read all that together. We had to. We didn't have the internet. As proficient, as informationists now, you didn't have all that. You didn't have TikTokers and Instagrammers and, information overload all day, every day. And so, we really had to say, oh my gosh, that's this kid, and that's this kid. And it really was career changing at that point. And that was, late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. And so it really has grown kind of as you've done this. All right, that's great, walking down memory lane, but let's get back to this because I want to share this resource. Okay?
Yes, okay.
Is there something you wanted me to say specifically?
No, I wanted to share your perspective.
Yeah. All right. So be kind to the old therapist that you're working with. All right. So anyway, back to this. Amy Weatherby should be every SLP's favorite researcher for autism. She has done such groundbreaking work. And so her websites, Autism Navigator and babynavigator.com, there's a fantastic screener, and it's evidence-based, that you can use. And this is, if you are a speech pathologist or any other kind of therapist who's watching our show, thank you so much for being here. You can use this screener when you aren't sure, when you're saying, back to this is the confidence piece, way back at that discussion. You can be sure because you're going to use a little tool and just kind of go through this. Now, ideally, you would get your parents, you would send the parents the link the first time they mention autism, say, hey, I've got this great screener, and you can look at you can just take this at home, and we can talk about this when you come back next week or whenever you're ready to talk about it. And so you've given them that information and they can do that. Or, like I said before, you can use this for you. And so you go through this. And let's just read through this. And I'm going to share the link below so that you have access to this and you can share it with your families and parents. Is it hard to get your baby to look at you? Does your baby rarely share enjoyment with you? Does your baby rarely share their interests with you? Does your baby rarely respond to their name or other bids for interaction? And that would be like, when you're gesturing, come here, that kind of thing. Does your baby show a limited use of gestures, such as showing and pointing? Is it hard for your baby to look at you and use a gesture and sound? Does your baby do little to no imitating of other people or pretending? Does your baby use your hand as a tool? Is your baby more interested in objects than people? And sometimes I say to a parent, as if we were talking about this, like this might include the iPad. Okay. Does your baby have unusual ways of moving their fingers, hands, or bodies? Does your baby repeat unusual movements with objects? That would be like, laying down on the floor and Roland Thomas, within an inch of their eyes, anything like that. Does your baby develop rituals and get very upset over change? Does your baby have an excessive interest in particular objects or activities? Is your baby very focused on or attached to unusual objects? Does your baby have unusual reactions to sounds, sights, or textures? And then does your baby show interest in unusual sensory explorations? Those, and again, she's listed to this here as total number of early signs of autism. And so she also gives some criteria. She says if your child shows 4 or more of these early signs, and then gives a link where they can take another little, get some information and have some other little check marks. So there's some kind of ongoing kind of follow-up. The parent would have to initiate that. If you're seeing them, you can kind of help them with that too, or not. This is just information. But it's saying, if a kid has 8 or more of these signs, ask your doctor for a referral for a diagnostic evaluation. And so sometimes just sharing this information, again, with parents would be great, but the biggest thing might be for you to really increase your confidence with how comfortable you get. And when you start kind of seeing these things and realizing, oh my goodness, I do know what I'm talking about. I do know what I'm looking at. I can go ahead and make this referral with confidence. And then you're able to talk about things, and you've got a piece of paper to kind of rely on when you are again, just to boost your own confidence. So a lot of times therapists come to early intervention, like I think what's our question from show number 1, the mom is returning to early intervention after she'd been off with her kids for a while. So you feel like, oh, I got to get back in here and get my head back in the game.
Yes.
This would be a really good tool for you to use. And then I want to go ahead and mention again those handouts from my courses 437 and 438, and it walks through the DSM criteria for autism so that you can read through that. And again, you're looking at the black and white wording there. So you are going to increase your confidence because you're looking at it right there. And you can just increase your familiarity with that. All right.
So I think that's really important for therapists who feel like you're not sure to rely on a screening tool. Yeah. So even therapists, that it might be a super uncomfortable topic for you to do, or maybe you have a belief that it's overdiagnosed or whatever. We should, as speech language pathologists, be using a screening tool, and I will be doing a screener before I just rely on my own autism radar. That's a really good point. I like this.
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. And I've heard her speak before, so I really like her. And so I just think it's a great way to even have a conversation with a parent. And I've certainly done that before, using the handout as a way to kind of get the conversation started. And then sometimes parents tell you things and you just kind of build on those conversations and you're able to really, again, have a kind of a written script almost for your conversation because you've got the handout right there. And so those are the 3 main tools that I use with that.
Okay, so let's back up again. We talked about timing. Then we talked about using the screener as an open door. We talked about how sometimes the parents open the door, so you better have that screener right there in your notebook. Yeah. So you can pull it out. Yeah. We need to talk about exactly what we say. We didn't talk about this in the prep, so I'm putting you on the
Surprise!
spot. I want to go first.
Go.
So I always say, or you can go first.
You go
now
first.
I'm feeling nervous. But again, we're embracing it's okay to be nervous.
It's okay. We do it even when we're scared. Yeah,
we
so
do.
go ahead. Show us how it's done.
Okay. Classic mom
Yep.
thing to do. So the door opened. Maybe the parent asked, why do they do this? Actually, I want to talk about the hardest scenario when that parent is avoiding it again. There is this sweet girl that I saw that the mom avoided it, wanted to label this apraxia. And we do know that they have a correlation. What is the specific percent?
It's up to 65%, y'all.
So
around
it was
65%. So
it was, in this case, was apraxia too.
But you know what I say? I talk about that autism a lot of times has so many comorbidities with it. So you can be apraxic and autistic. Now you can have autism without apraxia, but anytime a kid is nonverbal, I think that they're just severely apraxic. I mean, that's just my own personal opinion with that. But I'm just saying, and you can certainly have apraxia without autism, and we have a lot of family history of apraxia without autism on my side of the family. So I understand why parents would want to cling to...
But it's this.
Yeah, but if they are showing the social...
So that's what I did.
They need social support. Is that what you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, back to the story.
Yes, so this was one of the hardest times I've ever had to share.
I shared my hardest time, so I'm glad you're sharing yours.
Yes, and the mom is listing the characteristics of apraxia, okay? And so I had to I gave myself that month, and I took the whole month to do it, okay? And I had already seen this child for maybe 2 months before this. And they are listing the characteristics of apraxia, and I am I felt uncomfortable, but I was saying yes, but I want you to realize this is also a social deficit right now. This play is delayed. The typical play for this age range should be this, and we are working towards that. She is doing great. We are making strides. You know, we are making steps to get there. But look, this is a social deficit. Or as soon as the transition was hard, hey, this is a transitional difference right now. This should not be this.
This is not because of apraxia.
Yeah, this is, yes, exactly. I pointed out why it's different from apraxia over those 3 weeks. And then at the 4th week, I was still uncomfortable. And I looked at her and I said, hey, I feel like we're friends. And I'm so thankful that we're friends. But I'm about to tell you something that I know is going to be hard for you. But I need to tell you as your speech language pathologist, not your friend. Aww. And so I know I'm going to cry just thinking about it because that family was just so near and dear to me. And we cried together, of course. Yeah. And I said, your child's name is showing characteristics of autism spectrum disorder. I paused and I said, so our next step, I will explain all this in a minute, but our next step is that I'm referring you to get a developmental evaluation done, and this is how we're going to do it, and I'm going to write it out for you, and I'm going to be with you every step of the way, and I know that this is so hard for you. Aww. And then we explained some things, and I talked about, you know, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. It's just we need to point it out. We don't need to be scared.
We don't need to be scared.
And it is going to change my treatment plan. Yeah. So that's why we do it, right? Because you are going to think about an autistic child's treatment different than you think about an apraxic child's different.
Absolutely.
Different than you think about a language delayed kid.
Absolutely.
So that's why we have to pick the path we're going to go down. And that was a really hard road for them. And that's when I started introducing that poem. But I forgot to look up the name of the poem.
It's the sweet little poem. It's been around forever. It's that Welcome to Holland or Welcome to
Greenland.
I can't believe that I'm forgetting that now and that we didn't look for that. But that is just such a sweet little poem.
We'll link it to in the YouTube video.
And I remember when Macy told me that yesterday when we were prepping for the show, I was like, oh, that little poem, I haven't thought about that in forever.
It's so sweet, and it's just another great way to validate parents and to connect with parents, because we're not always having that speech language pathologist hat, right? We're also sometimes having that friend hat or that counselor hat in that moment, and I send it to them. I've also printed it out before, but basically the poem talks about, it's comparing a trip that you're going on to having a baby. And when you have a baby, I'm getting emotional now, right? You're just so scared. Anything can happen. And it's just a wild ride, right? Just as life is. And so it's comparing having a baby. You know, you think about having a child and you have all these dreams for them. And you think, oh, what color hair are they going to have? What color eyes are they going to have? You know, you think about what career they're going to have. And that's just when that love starts to develop. Well, you're comparing having a child to going on a trip. And specifically, parents have loved this poem because the poem talks about you get on the, the transportation system, and all of a sudden you're in a different country. And as you can relate, a trip to a different country than you had a different plan for, you get out, you're like, where am I? But then the trip becomes a great, wonderful new trip. So I'll link that down below as well. But that's when I started to share that, because I thought there has to be another way I can help her emotionally right now. So that was the hardest thing, when parents avoid it, and sometimes you're just going to have to blurt it out. But that's when a screener would have been really good too, not just
your own personal opinion.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially, I do think, and this can happen, ageism happens when they think, oh, you're too young, you don't even have kids, you can't tell me that my kid has this. You don't even know my kid. You don't even know kids. That can happen to young therapists. For older therapists, it's, oh, you're too old. You've been doing this for too long. You're too jaded. You just want to see autism in everybody. You don't, that kind of thing. And I will say, too, with the whole neuro-affirming movement, it is easier for parents to have heard about autism in a way that's not negative. And
yeah,
so,
that's a great positive.
Yeah. And so you will have the parents that really, or they have, you know, because there's such a genetic link or predisposition or whatever you want to, whatever word is the right word to use today.
Yeah.
That they know people that have autism, or they start to think in the middle of the process. So many parents will say, oh my goodness, I think I have autism too.
Yeah.
Or I think my brother's autistic, or my dad.
Yeah.
You know, and so they start to really kind of think about autism not as just something that's, you know, that diagnosis specific to their child, but they've had enough experience
Yes.
or outside kind of information coming in that's not negative. It's, you know, it's information,
right.
It's data. And so they've gotten that information, and it's not quite as, you know, it's common now. It's common. Yeah. Everybody knows somebody with autism. It's not like when we were talking about this, and we were talking about this yesterday when we were prepping the show. She said, who's the first person that you remember? And I said, when I was in college and had my, you know, one mention of autism, you know, in 19, you know, whatever that was, especially, you know, my undergrad degree, 84 to 88. Is that right? Yeah. They, you know, autism was really, really rare. And that's when we still, you know, IDA was coming out and all that, but they still, it was pretty new. And so the theories about it then, you know, were ridiculous. But I remember thinking in my college, I can remember sitting in that course, you know, being a sophomore at the W in Columbus, Mississippi, and thinking, my friend, Dinosaur Dell. You know, I went to elementary school with a little boy named Dell who was obsessed with dinosaurs. And I was
Which I clarified, by the way, he didn't mind that you guys called him that.
No, we all called him that. He thought it was a great nickname.
Yeah.
But he was so, you know, he was in our normal, you know, he was in our classrooms. He was talking. He just only wanted to talk about dinosaurs. You know,
so
he was
one in your elementary school.
Yeah, that I can remember.
Which is just bizarre to me because I remember.
Well, as you were growing up, we would talk about it.
Kids in my preschool class, then in my kindergarten class.
Yeah.
Like in my class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dell was in my class too. He's one of my best friends. I'll probably get a message from him now.
Hello, Dinosaur Dell. Do you want to be a guest on the podcast?
We're going to have to cut all this. But anyway, back to this.
No, what I'm saying is, yeah, that's bizarre because you just see it so often now. Now that it's easier for parents to relate to, we're thankful for the positivity of the autism
totally.
movement.
And they have people that they know and love already, you know, in their families, and people that they've known in their lifetimes. And so I think that's a really important, you know, that's great. That's been a phenomenal shift.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's been great.
I want to talk about when a parent says, but my pediatrician didn't mention this to me.
Yeah.
Because that happens so often, right? And you're like, well, you need to change pediatrician.
I know. Well, you know, when we were prepping for this show, and I don't know if I can find the exact numbers if I wrote it in my little handwriting here. All pediatricians, the American Academy of Pediatrics, I looked this up yesterday, has strongly recommended, I don't know that we can use the word like mandated because you can't control what people really do, but they've recommended developmental screenings at like 9 months.
The ASQ.
Yes, which you hate, which you're going to talk about in a minute.
Well, I don't hate, but okay, yeah.
Ages and Stages questionnaire. Okay, pediatricians are supposed to administer that at like, I had the numbers written down. I think it's like 9 months, 18 months, and 30 months or something like that. And then in between there, they're supposed to do heightened screening for autism. And so basically every time that you're going in, you know, like 9 months, 18 months, 24 months, 30 months, there's supposed to be some kind of developmental milestone screening so that a pediatrician is asking these questions. And so to me, I just wonder, when that happens, did the pediatrician drop the ball and not do the screening, or
there's been
the parent did not answer questions? What happened?
So it's really the validity of the assessment is so
the Ages and Stages questionnaire is what you think that most pediatricians are using, the kids that you've just gotten recently referred. You think so?
I think it's also, I mean, when my son was going through daycare, we received it. I think early intervention programs, daycares,
pediatricians, everybody uses it.
They send it out.
The problem is
because it's so, subjective. Is that the word I'm thinking of?
Yeah. It's parent report.
It's parent report.
Yeah.
And so if the parent doesn't have a great grasp on some of these characteristics,
right?
It's a parent report, right?
It's not sensitive enough. Is what you're trying to say.
Yes.
It's not sensitive enough
a lot
to
of children.
pick up more subtle. Now, a kid who's going to go on and get diagnosed with level 3 autism, and again, that would be stems are present. They have sometimes very little awareness or of other people. So there's some big time social differences, social interaction pattern differences there. So a kid who would be super obvious, not going to miss.
Right. So it picks up those kids. I guess if we're looking for a positive of the ASQ, okay, whatever. Yeah, it picks up those kids. But it misses the majority of, I don't know about majority, don't quote me. I don't want any emails about this. I just am saying that it can miss, and it often misses those other kids.
Well, think about this. Now, and this happened a long time ago. This little girl is I probably saw her in 2012 or so. So, she's probably pretty old now, probably a teenager. But her mother desperately tried to get her to qualify for the Kentucky First Steps program. And she didn't, because she had too many words.
Yes.
But they were all nouns. They were all labels.
Right.
And they were all only when she used her little Leapfrog book. Yeah. Otherwise, she didn't use any words. But that mom, because she reported that strength, which is fantastic. Oh my goodness, she's imitating at the single word level, and she has great receptive language, and she's putting all this together stuff, but she didn't qualify.
Yeah.
And so, we've had that happen for a long time, and that's when I first started hearing that Ages and Stages questionnaire may not be as great, and that was a long time ago. Yeah. That's my point to telling this long story. That was like 12 years ago. And so, that's historic that it may have missed some of those things. But a lot of people are talking about that now. And so your whole point about this is sometimes a parent will disagree with you
because their pediatrician did not bring up the point. Well, you could talk about the there may not be validity within the ASQ. Research shows that. Or you could talk about, you as the parent know the child best. Or let's ask some people that see this child weekly like I do to really evaluate these characteristics too. And I want to also talk about, then I kind of prepped that child or that parent to say, okay, well then that means that it might be hard to get a referral, because that's all we're talking about, right? Is hey, here are the characteristics. This is a new bump because my pediatrician doesn't agree with me. Okay, well then you're going to have to ask that pediatrician directly. Here, you can use my information. You could say, my speech language pathologist sees concerns for autism spectrum disorder.
Right.
I would like a referral for a developmental evaluation. I've had a lot of people have to argue with their pediatrician to fight and advocate for their child to get a referral. Okay,
and so that's going to be the benefit of, like, if that kid was in an early intervention program, you can have the referral could come from the early intervention team and did not have to be. Is it a direct physician referral always in Kentucky now?
I don't know, but I just know.
Well, your therapist can help you fight that battle, is my point. And I know you had to help that parent fight that battle.
I've had many parents fight that battle to receive a referral. Okay, so I also want to jump into why we even do this, why we even why are we even doing this, to point out this, is because the wait lists are so long.
Exactly. And so to get that developmental evaluation, you want that kid on the list as soon as possible. And I've even told parents before, by the time you get an appointment, you may not even be concerned about this anymore. And so it kind of gives them an out.
Yeah.
But I don't say that as much as I used to, because then parents start, oh, we said a word, let's go on and cancel that evaluation. And so you've got to just kind of be careful with how you do that. And Macy and I were talking about this yesterday. I think sometimes it's your setting that makes the difference. You never did home visits except for when you were a little girl going with me. She has a lot of shadowing hours. Okay, but if you were in someone's home Going in week after week, the relationship gets much more personal. And I know you can put up all kinds of, and especially it just kind of depends on what kind of person you are. Some people are able to kind of naturally maintain that level of professionalism despite where you see a family. But I think sometimes when you see families at home, it's just a little bit different. And it's more of an educationally based service. Certainly our school programs, and a lot of states have state early intervention programs that are run and implemented by their local school districts. And so you feel like it's more education. You've always been medical.
Yeah. Well, my school year.
Oh, I forgot about that.
But I guess I didn't. No, so when you're in a school, when you're a baby CF, always have the autism talk if you
and it was during COVID, so weird times.
But I guess what I'm saying, majority of my other time has been in a medical setting. So they were already coming in
as an outpatient.
And
it was already kind of medically based through University of Kentucky, that whole system, hospital, da-da-da. So that's certainly different. I think it does make it a little different, just kind of knowing from my perspective. And again, because I've practiced for so long, things have changed. And so it's much easier to have these conversations and do these things and feel like you're not overstepping your bounds and that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because you've had so much training by now. And and again, it's almost all of our caseloads. Now, I will say, I was thinking about this. Our little caseload, we had a teeny tiny little summer program that we did here at our clinic in Lexington, and all of our people, how we recruited these kids were just from people we knew already. So referrals from other therapists or other families or because we wanted, just to be able to video and all those things that, we do. Our percentage was only about half, though. Think about it. We didn't talk about this yesterday. We only had about half of our kids with autism, but for the majority of people listening to us, I think that most of their kids.
Oh, definitely my graduate student friends, or my graduate friends. Other speech pathologists I've met, just in the community. And we're all like,
yeah, we didn't know it was going to be this way. And that is what I get from things from therapists a lot is I didn't think it was going to be this way. I didn't think almost every kid I see would have autism. And it kind of makes you jaded a little bit because then you do start to kind of look for autism and you're surprised when you get a kid that's just apraxic or just language delayed or whatever. But there's actually a bigger pie of those kids than kids with autism. This is just part of our caseload. All right, what else do you want to talk about before we're wrapping this baby up today? I wanted to talk about the reasons that that therapists sometimes are a little afraid to have the talk with parents. We said that it could be that you don't feel like it's in your scope of practice. And then we said it could be because you weren't confident. And then it could be because you were afraid of the parent's reaction. And our thing with that is, no, do it scared.
Own it scared.
Yeah.
Say you're scared.
Yeah. Have that talk just as soon as you can because you may be doing an inservice, disjustice, whatever the word is, injustice to that family by withholding information that they need to be able to make the right decisions for their families. We were talking, have you ever gotten fired for telling somebody that they were autistic or referring for an assessment?
So because I was, in a different setting, yes. I think something we also need to talk about real quick. I have gotten the child asked my supervisor to see another therapist because the developmental pediatrician said that the child did not have autism.
Oh.
And that, I'm just saying that's only happened to me.
They can be, but the pediatrician,
1 out of 99 times. And I don't still agree with that.
And I've had that happen a lot.
Oh, wow. That's why I sent you there because I wanted, someone else to diagnose. However, if you still see these blah, blah, blah things, I think we should pursue a second opinion. And I want to mention, when I was a student, my great mentor, one of the supervisors that I had, told me, and it just changed my perspective. Sometimes it takes 3 other professionals, 3 people outside of the parent to say, hey, something's different with your child. Hey, is that autism? Whatever it is, for that parent to really comprehend that. So in that situation, they did come back to tell me that they now have a diagnosis a couple years later.
I've had that happen a lot.
And so I was thankful that I pushed myself to be one of those 3 people to tell them, even though it was, incredibly hard situation. But you've been,
I've been fired a few times for that. And had really uncomfortable conversations. The worst one is probably 2 physicians who were married. And again, the same kind of autism wall at the beginning with, I don't want to hear autism. I don't want you coming in here. It's overdiagnosed. We believe, my husband, is a neurologist and didn't talk till he was 5 or, something like that. Something like that.
Ding, ding.
You're so funny. But that kind of thing, and I got fired in that situation. Or I think I was about to be fired. The OT told me I was about to get fired, so I graciously pulled away so we could avoid that whole, that mom telling me off one more time. And you just have to, that's just part of it.
It's part of it.
It's just part of it. And so don't be scared. Do it scared. Give information. I always think about if I were that mom, I would feel betrayed if I found out later that therapist really knew, or if she waited 6 months to tell me, I would be madder about that than her telling me up front. And yes, I might have gotten emotional and blah, 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 all those other things. If that's your reason, we're on reason number 3, you're afraid of the reaction, and again, I don't think that happens as much. Maybe I'm wrong, but it used to happen a lot.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You can't, that's not living in reality if you're afraid of what could happen, because that hasn't happened yet.
And we can't control other people and their reactions. Oh my goodness, have I learned that?
So we need to wrap up the show, but we could make this into a part 2 if other therapists have, other questions about how to have the talk about autism with families. We could make this into a part 2.
Maybe we could. All right. So I do want to say one other thing. Sometimes parents do, again, because there's that strong genetic component, sometimes parents recognize themselves or their other children and they, then it becomes kind of a, that tug of war of, do we, are we going to get everybody evaluated, all of that thing. So sometimes they're dealing with things more than even you thinking about beyond their child and that one little situation happening. I will say too, for parents, I've had quite a number of pediatricians that I see their children or other kinds of therapists, and they might know and think about autism in the back of their mind for every other child except their own. Or even they're thinking about it, but they're not really, they're, telling you they don't, again. So it's harder to see it with your own kid.
Yeah.
Even if you are, I had one time a pediatrician who I worked, it's when we were still living in Louisville. She was at a practice that diagnosed autism. She was very negative about it for her own little boy. But, I mean, she came around and it all worked out okay. But those things happen.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they don't happen as much as they used to. But it is harder when it's your own kid. I just know from my own personal experience, too, I have a mom brain and I have a professional brain.
Definitely.
And sometimes those things don't always mix. And we're kind of blinded by our love for our children, which is wonderful. But, and again, parents feel that same way. And you're always talking about somebody's baby.
I know.
And that's the other thing. And I you understand that. The older you get, when you have children of your own, when you have grandchildren, that emotional piece there, it's really, really hard sometimes to see that. But we have to always approach these kind of things with, this is information. I would want to have it if I were on the other side. I would be upset if a therapist withheld this information from me.
We are required to do it as speech language pathologists.
Yeah, and we want to move toward that. We hope that we've given you some tools to kind of think about and talk about. The autism screener, I think, is a great tool, and maybe I've converted you. If you don't routinely use a tool, you're just kind of going by your own professional experience. And again, you've had great experience to do that with, because you grew up with a mother who talked about this from the time we got up till the time we went to bed, plus your fantastic education, plus serving on that autism team. So you could do that. But sometimes other therapists may not feel that confident, and so using that screener will help you be able to do that. And then I mentioned those other 2 shows.